When my husband died, my children took everything. The businesses, the houses, the cars, the $30 million empire he spent his life building. And I was handed one old envelope. They laughed at me when I received it. I didn't say a word, but that night, when I opened it alone, everything changed. Before I begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps these stories reach others who may need to hear them. And if this story touches you, stay with me until the end, because what happens next is something I never imagined at 69 years old. My name is Alina. I was married to my husband Arthur for 45 years, 45 years of early mornings and late nights, of meals eaten alone because he was working, of phone calls that started with just one more deal, I'll be home soon. I never complained. I stood beside him while he built everything from nothing, from a single rented office and a second-hand desk into an empire people whispered about with admiration. And when he died, I thought at least one thing was certain, that I would be taken care of. The will was read 1 week after the funeral in a quiet law office that smelled like old paper and cold coffee. I wore a simple dark dress and the necklace Arthur gave me on our 20th anniversary. My hands were folded in my lap. I remember thinking how strange it felt to sit there without him. Across from me sat my sons, Stephen and Daniel, both grown men, both confident, both impatient. Stephen barely looked at me. Daniel kept checking his watch. The lawyer cleared her throat and began. She read for a long time. Properties, companies, accounts, assets that sounded endless. Stephen received the construction businesses. Daniel received the restaurants and investment holdings. They nodded, smiled, whispered to each other. $30 million divided neatly between them, and then my name was finally mentioned. For Alina, the lawyer said, hesitating just slightly, Arthur left this. She slid a thin, yellowed envelope across the desk. That was it, no explanation, no number, no comfort. Just an envelope that looked like it had been forgotten in a drawer for years. I picked it up. It felt almost empty. Stephen let out a small laugh. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. And Jessica, Stephen's wife, smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. Well, she said lightly, at least it's something. Something. After 45 years, I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't ask questions. I stood up, thanked the lawyer quietly, and walked out of that office alone. No one followed me. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off, the envelope resting on the coffee table in front of me. The house felt unbearably silent. This was the same house where Arthur used to read the paper every morning, where we argued about paint colors, where we dreamed about growing old together. Now it felt like a place I no longer belonged. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Part of me was afraid to open it, because deep down I thought I already knew what was inside. A letter, a goodbye, some sentimental words meant to comfort a woman who had been quietly pushed aside. I finally opened it. Inside was one page. A single line of handwriting I recognized instantly, Arthur's, and beneath it an account number, nothing more, no explanation, just one sentence written carefully, deliberately. They didn't need to know, you do. My breath caught. I read it again, and again. My hands began to shake. I didn't understand it yet, not fully, but something inside me knew. This envelope wasn't an insult. It was a message. And whatever it meant, it was going to change everything. But I had no idea just how much. I didn't open the envelope right away. That might sound strange, but after what happened at the lawyer's office, I felt hollow, as if every emotion had been scooped out of me and replaced with something cold and heavy. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long time, still wearing my coat, my purse hanging from my shoulder like I might leave again at any moment. But there was nowhere to go. The house felt different now. Not empty, foreign. Every room whispered memories I wasn't sure I was welcome to keep anymore. The kitchen where I packed lunches for decades. The dining table where Arthur sat at the head, reviewing papers while I served dinner. The living room where my sons once wrestled on the carpet, begging their father to play. Now those same sons had looked at me like I was an inconvenience. I finally hung up my coat, made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink, and sat down. The envelope stared back at me, thin, unimpressive, mocked only hours earlier. I kept hearing Jessica's laugh in my head, at least it's something. That sentence replayed over and over, each time cutting deeper. I had given that woman family holidays, babysitting, support when her own mother was ill, and now she had reduced me to a joke. The anger surprised me. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, steady, and heavy, like a door slowly closing inside my chest. I thought about Arthur, about the man I knew. Arthur was not careless, he was not cruel, and he was not sentimental for sentiment's sake. If he had left me nothing but a letter, it would have been intentional. And that thought kept me from throwing the envelope away. Instead, I carried it upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, and held the envelope in both hands. Only then did I notice something strange. The paper was old but not fragile. It had been handled many times. Opened, closed, kept. Arthur had returned to it. That detail made my heart begin to race. Slowly, I slid my finger beneath the seal. The sound it made felt unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Inside was a single folded page, no legal formatting, no lawyer's stamp, just Arthur's handwriting. The sight of it made my chest ache. I hadn't realized how much I missed him until that moment. I unfolded the page carefully, afraid it might fall apart in my hands. At the top, there was no greeting, no "my dear Alina," just words, precise and deliberate. A bank name, a country, an account number, nothing else. I stared at it, confused. Was this some old account he'd forgotten to close? A mistake? A joke? Then I read the sentence beneath it again. They didn't need to know, you do. My throat tightened. Arthur had known something about our sons, something he didn't trust them with. I sat there for a long time, staring at that page, my mind racing through memories, conversations that suddenly felt different. The nights Arthur stayed up late after phone calls from Stephen. The tension when Daniel asked for money just until next month. The way Arthur had grown quieter in his final year. Had I missed something? Or had I simply trusted too easily? I folded the page and pressed it against my chest. That night I barely slept, not because I knew the truth, but because I sensed it was coming. The next morning I made a decision I never imagined I'd make at my age. I picked up the phone. My hand trembled as I dialed the number printed on the page. An international tone. A pause, then a calm voice answered. I gave my name. There was silence on the line, not awkward but deliberate. "Yes," the voice finally said. "We've been expecting your call." Those words sent a chill through me. Expecting me, I sank into the chair. The woman on the line spoke carefully, professionally, as if she were trained for moments like this. She asked for verification, details only Arthur and I would know, our wedding date, our first address. The nickname he used only when we were alone. Each answer unlocked something. And then she said the words that made the room tilt. "Mrs. Alina, the account is active." I swallowed hard. "And the balance?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was another pause, longer this time. Then she spoke a number. I didn't understand it at first. My mind refused to process it. She repeated it slowly. And then I stopped breathing. I ended the call sitting on the floor, my back against the cabinet, the phone lying beside me. The envelope slipped from my hand. Arthur hadn't abandoned me, he had protected me. And suddenly I understood something terrifying and extraordinary all at once. The envelope wasn't a consolation, it was a key, and whatever door it opened, my sons were never meant to walk through it. I didn't tell my sons, not that day. Not the next. I moved through the hours like a ghost, answering calls I didn't care about, listening to voices that sounded far away. Stephen left a voicemail. "Mom, we're worried about you. You should really consider staying somewhere with supervision for a while." Daniel sent a text. "We can talk finances later, just rest. Rest." As if rest was what I needed, they were already circling. And for the first time, I understood why Arthur had done things the way he did. That afternoon, a delivery arrived. No logo on the vehicle, no branding, just a well-dressed courier who asked for my signature and handed me a compact steel case. "He asked that this be delivered only after you contacted the bank," the man said. Only after. Arthur had planned everything. I carried the case into the living room and placed it on the coffee table. It was heavier than it looked. There was a small envelope taped to the top. Inside it, 4 numbers, our wedding date. My hands shook as I dialed the combination. The lock clicked open. Inside were documents, photographs, USB drives, and a letter, not typed. Handwritten, Arthur's handwriting again. My breath caught as I unfolded it. "My dearest Alina, if you're reading this, then the envelope did its job, and my heart breaks knowing why. I didn't leave you unprotected. I left you prepared. I need you to understand something before anything else. I never stopped loving our sons, but love doesn't mean blindness. And I saw things you were never meant to carry while I was alive. My vision blurred as I read on. Arthur explained how during his final 2 years he began noticing inconsistencies. Missing funds, strange transfers, late-night calls that stopped when he entered the room. He hired professionals, quietly, discreetly, because he didn't want to believe it. The first file was labeled Stephen. I opened it with trembling hands, bank statements, casino markers, loan agreements, amounts that made my stomach twist. Arthur had written in the margin. He thinks I don't notice. He's wrong. Stephen, my responsible firstborn, had been bleeding money for years, borrowing, losing, covering losses with company funds. The next file was labeled Daniel, photographs, shadows, strangers, receipts. I felt sick. Arthur wrote, "He's not reckless, he's drowning." And then came the words that stopped my heart. "They talked about you." I read that sentence over and over. Arthur described overhearing a conversation late at night when medication had made them careless. Stephen had said it would be easier once Arthur was gone. Daniel agreed. Jessica laughed. They talked about facilities, doctors who could be convinced, papers already drafted. "She won't understand what's happening," one of them said. I dropped the letter, my own son's, planning my erasure. Arthur wrote that was the moment he stopped pretending things would fix themselves. He didn't confront them. He prepared. He moved assets, created structures, left them what they thought was everything, and left me what actually was. At the bottom of the letter, Arthur had written one final line: "You never needed saving, Alina. You needed truth." I sat there for a long time. The house was silent. But inside me, something shifted. Grief gave way to clarity. Fear gave way to resolve. This wasn't about money. It was about survival and dignity. That evening, Stephen showed up unannounced. "I just want to make sure you're okay," he said, eyes scanning the room. I smiled. "I'm fine," I said softly. And for the first time it was true. He didn't realize it then. But the balance of power had already changed. And Arthur, even in death, had made sure of it. They didn't wait long. 3 days after the will reading, the calls started coming more often, closer together, more urgent, wrapped in concern that felt rehearsed. Stephen called first. "Mom, we've been talking," he said. "You shouldn't be alone right now. Everything happens so fast. Dad, the funeral, the will, it's a lot." "I'm managing," I replied calmly. There was a pause on the line. "Well, managing doesn't always mean coping," he said carefully. "We just want what's best for you." I almost laughed. Almost. Daniel called later that evening. Same tone, same concern, same script. "You haven't been answering texts," he said. "That worries us." "I've been busy," I said. "With what?" "Thinking." Silence. They didn't like that answer. The next morning, Jessica showed up at my house without calling. She walked in like she still owned the place, heels clicking against the floor Arthur and I had picked together decades ago. "Oh, Alina," she sighed dramatically, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. "This house must feel so empty." "It's quiet," I said, "not empty." She smiled, thin, tight. "We were thinking," she said, glancing around, "that maybe this place is too much for you now, the stairs, the upkeep, the memories." The words landed exactly where they were meant to. I nodded slowly. "Maybe," I said, her eyes lit up. "There's a lovely senior residence just outside the city," she continued. "Gardens, activities, medical staff, very supportive." Supportive, that was the word they used when they meant controlled. Stephen joined her the next day. This time he brought papers, just information, he said, brochures, forms, highlighted sections. "All we're asking," he said gently, "is that you let us help." I let my shoulders slump, I let my voice tremble. "I don't know if I can handle all this alone," I whispered. Their relief was instant. Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Jessica reached for my hand. "That's all we wanted to hear," she said. They thought I was breaking. What they didn't know was that every word, every visit, every pressure-filled conversation was confirming exactly what Arthur had warned me about. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about timing. That night, alone in my bedroom, I opened the steel case again. I reviewed everything. Dates, documents, signatures, and one particular file caught my attention. A draft agreement, not finalized, not signed, but prepared. It outlined guardianship, temporary incapacity, transfer of financial oversight. I felt a cold calm settle over me. They weren't improvising. They had planned this. The next morning, I made my first quiet move. I called the bank again, then a lawyer Arthur had listed in the case, someone my sons had never met. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't accuse. I didn't warn. Instead, I let them believe I was exactly who they thought I was. A grieving widow, confused, overwhelmed, easy, Stephen called that evening. So, he said, trying to sound casual, have you thought more about the residents? Yes, I replied, his breath caught. And, I think I should visit, I said softly. Jessica practically clapped. That's wonderful, she said. We'll arrange everything. As they left, Stephen turned back. Mom, he said, smiling, this is the right choice. I smiled back. It is, I said, just not for the reason he thought. Because while they were planning how to move me out, I was preparing to take everything back. The facility visit was scheduled for Friday morning. Stephen insisted on driving. Jessica insisted on coming. Daniel said he had meetings and would join later. Interesting. As we drove out of the city, the buildings slowly gave way to long stretches of road and quiet trees. The farther we went, the less cell service I noticed on my phone. I didn't say anything, but I noticed, always notice. This place is beautiful, Jessica said brightly, reading from the brochure in her lap. Very exclusive, long waiting list. Exclusive, remote, perfect. We arrived at a large gated property with soft music playing near the entrance and smiling people in pastel uniforms walking slowly across manicured lawns. On the surface, it looked peaceful. Too peaceful. The director greeted us warmly. She shook Stephen's hand first, then Daniel's. He had arrived separately after all. I noticed how familiar she seemed with them, not like first-time visitors. We were led into a private office. Tea was served, papers were placed neatly on the table. The director smiled at me. Mrs. Aliner, she said gently, we understand you've been through a difficult time. I nodded. We specialize in helping residents transition comfortably, she continued. Especially those experiencing emotional distress or confusion after loss. Confusion, that word again. Jessica leaned forward. We're just so worried, she said. She forgets things sometimes, gets overwhelmed. I looked down at my hands. Stephen added quietly, we just want her safe. The director slid a document toward me. Nothing binding yet, she said. Just an evaluation consent? I read every word, carefully. Temporary assessment, discretionary authority, financial oversight pending review. I signed nothing. Instead, I looked up. What happens if I decide I don't like it here? I asked. The director hesitated. Well, she said, choosing her words, family involvement is strongly encouraged. Encouraged, meaning pressured, Daniel finally spoke. Mom, this isn't about what you like, he said softly. It's about what you need. That was the moment, not anger, not grief, clarity. I realized something very important right then. They weren't testing the facility for me. They were testing me for compliance. I smiled. I'd like some time alone, I said, just to walk around. Stephen opened his mouth to object. The director raised a hand. Of course, she said. We encourage independence. I walked slowly through the gardens, past benches, past locked side doors disguised as decorative panels, past security cameras tucked neatly into corners. This wasn't a home, it was a holding place. When I returned, Stephen was speaking quietly with the director. Daniel was on his phone, pacing. Jessica looked annoyed. All set? Stephen asked quickly. Yes, I said, and, Jessica pressed. I'll think about it, I said calmly. The drive home was silent, too silent. That night Stephen called, then Daniel, then Jessica, all within 1 hour. Their patience was thinning. The next morning I received an email from a doctor. An evaluation appointment? I never scheduled one. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 came when Stephen showed up again, this time with someone new. A man in a suit, introduced as a consultant. He smiled too much. Spoke too carefully, asked questions that had nothing to do with my health and everything to do with my memory. Do you remember signing any documents recently? Do you manage your own finances? Do you ever feel disoriented? I answered clearly. Calmly, precisely. When he left, I made my second quiet move. I didn't call my sons. I called the number Arthur had written in the margin of one document. The lawyer answered on the first ring. I'm ready, I said. That afternoon, the board of directors for the main holding company received an emergency notice. Ownership review, authority clarification, immediate freeze on executive actions. Stephen didn't know yet. Daniel didn't know yet. Jessica definitely didn't know, but they would. Very soon. That night, as I locked my doors and set my phone beside my bed, I understood something clearly for the first time since Arthur died. They thought the clock was running out on me. They were wrong, the clock was running out on them. The phone rang at exactly 8:12 the next morning. "Stephen," I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he said, his voice sharp, rushed. "Did you authorize something with the company?" I smiled into my coffee. "Good morning to you too," I replied calmly. "The accounts are frozen," he snapped. "The board says there's been a review request. That doesn't just happen." "No," I said. "It doesn't." Silence. Then, carefully, "What did you do?" I didn't answer right away. I let the quiet stretch. "You told me to think about what was best for me," I finally said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." He exhaled hard. "Mom, this isn't the time to play games." "Funny," I replied. "That's what Arthur used to say when someone tried to bluff him." Another pause, this one heavier. Daniel called next. His voice wasn't angry, it was nervous. "Mom, did you talk to a lawyer?" "Yes." "Which one?" "Not Rose." That was enough. By noon, all three of them were at my door. No smiles, no politeness, no pretense. Stephen walked in like he owned the place. Daniel hovered behind him. Jessica didn't bother hiding her irritation. "What is going on?" Stephen demanded. "You can't just interfere with the businesses." I sat down. "Actually," I said, "I can." I slid one document across the table, then another, then another. The room grew quiet. Daniel swallowed hard. Jessica read faster than she should have. Stephen stared at the final page. "This isn't possible," he said. "Dad left us everything." "That's what you were told," I replied. "Not what he did." Jessica's voice cracked. "You're lying." I looked at her. "I don't need to." I stood and walked to the window. "For 45 years," I said slowly, "I watched contracts being signed at this table. I listened to late-night phone calls. I learned how money moves and how people hide it." Stephen slammed his hand down. "You're overreacting because you're grieving?" I turned. "No," I said quietly. "I'm reacting because I finally stopped being quiet." Daniel's hands were shaking. "Mom," he whispered, "please, we can talk about this." "Oh, we are," I replied. "Just not the way you planned." I explained the holding company, the shares, the authority, the review process. Their faces changed as each piece landed. Confusion, then fear, then something else. Panic. "You're trying to punish us," Jessica snapped. "No," I said, "I'm trying to protect myself." Stephen leaned forward. "You don't understand what you're doing. If this gets out, then people will see the books," I finished for him. "And I think we both know why that scares you." Daniel stood up. "Enough," he said. "This is getting out of hand." I looked at him. "You're right," I said. "It already did weeks ago." Jessica's phone buzzed. She checked it. Her face went pale. "What?" Stephen asked. She didn't answer. Stephen's phone buzzed too, then Daniel's. 3 phones, 3 expressions. The same message. "Emergency audit initiated. Executive actions suspended. Do not attempt asset transfers." Stephen dropped into a chair. Daniel rubbed his face. Jessica stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "You planned this," she whispered. I nodded. "Yes." "For how long?" Stephen asked. I thought of the envelope, the handwriting, the truth. "Long enough," I said. No one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, final. As they left, one by one, none of them hugged me. None of them apologized. Not yet, but something had shifted. They no longer spoke to me like a burden. They spoke to me like a threat. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. The first fallout came faster than I expected. 3 days after the audit notice went out, I woke up to 12 missed calls. Not from my children, from people they depended on. The bank, 2 suppliers, 1 investor. And a man who introduced himself as a concerned partner, which is usually code for someone who smells danger. By noon, Stephen's world was already cracking. He showed up at my house again, this time alone. No Jessica. No Daniel, no confidence. He looked smaller somehow, older. 12 projects are on hold, he said the moment he stepped inside. Workers are calling me nonstop. Clients are threatening lawsuits. I poured tea slowly. "You should sit," I said. He didn't. "This isn't what Dad would have wanted," he snapped. I finally looked at him. "Arthur wanted honesty," I said. "He wanted accountability, and most of all, he wanted me safe." Stephen clenched his jaw. "You think freezing everything makes you safe?" "No," I replied. "I think lying made me unsafe." He laughed bitterly. "You're destroying the family." I met his eyes. "No, Stephen, I'm exposing it." That's when his anger slipped. Just for a moment, and fear took its place. Mom, he said quietly, if this audit continues, people will look too closely. Yes, I said, they will. You don't understand, he whispered. Some of the money, I can't explain all of it. I waited. He didn't continue. Daniel called that night. He sounded different, not angry, not defensive, scared. They want to talk to me, he said. People I don't want to talk to? Who? I asked. He hesitated. People from the restaurant side, people asking about cash, about deliveries. I closed my eyes. Tell me the truth, Daniel, I said, not as your mother. As someone who can still help you. Silence. Then I messed up, just 3 words, but heavy. Bad, I asked. Yes. Dangerous? Yes. I exhaled slowly. That's why your father left what he left, I said, not to punish you. To give you a chance to choose differently? I don't know how, he admitted. You will, I said, but not by hiding. Jessica was the last to react, and when she did, it wasn't with fear, it was with spite. She sent an email, short, sharp. Threatening, if you don't reverse the freeze, we'll contest the will. I forwarded it to my attorney with 1 sentence. Proceed. The next day, she showed up unannounced, angry, defiant. You think you've won, she said. You're just an old woman with a stack of papers. I smiled. No, I replied. I'm an old woman with the truth, she scoffed. You won't ruin my life. I leaned closer. You already did that yourself, I said. I'm just not cleaning it up for you anymore. She left without another word. That night, I sat alone with the envelope on my desk, the one they laughed at, the one that started everything. I finally understood something Arthur had written between the lines. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. Consequences were never meant to be cruel. They were meant to be final. By the end of the week, Stephen had stepped down temporarily. Daniel agreed to cooperate fully with investigators. Jessica stopped calling. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time since Arthur died, I slept through the night. Because I knew one thing for certain now, the hardest part was over, and the final chapter was mine to write. The house felt different after that. Not emptier, clearer. For weeks I had lived inside noise, phone calls, accusations, fear disguised as concern. Now the silence wasn't heavy, it was earned. Stephen moved out of the city quietly. No announcement, no farewell dinner, just a text. I need time to fix what I broke. I won't touch anything without approval, that was all. Daniel called from a treatment center 2 states away, not to ask for money, not to argue. Just to say, I'm staying. And for the first time, I believed him. Jessica disappeared completely. No more emails, no more threats. Lawyers told me she was exploring options. I smiled at that phrase. Some people explore options. Others run out of them. The audit concluded 3 weeks later. Irregularities confirmed. Authority restored. Control legally affirmed. The empire they rushed to divide was never truly theirs. It had always been mine. One afternoon, I walked into the main office building for the first time alone. No escort, no explanation. People stood not because they were told to, because they recognized authority. I sat in Arthur's old chair. The one I had avoided for years. I didn't feel grief. I felt gratitude. That night I went home and opened the envelope again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember the account number, the handwriting, the quiet trust in every stroke of ink. Arthur didn't leave me money because he doubted our children. He left it because he believed in me, because he knew something they never saw. That strength doesn't disappear with age, it waits. I made my first independent decision the next morning. I redirected part of the assets into programs for women like me, women who gave everything and were left invisible. Legal support, financial education, protection. I wasn't building a legacy, I was correcting a pattern. Months passed. Stephen worked, really worked. Daniel healed, slowly, honestly, and me, I lived, not cautiously, not apologetically, fully. I stopped asking permission for space I had already earned. The last time I saw my children together was quiet. No speeches, no apologies, just understanding. As they left, Stephen paused. You know, he said, we laughed at that envelope. I nodded. Yes, I replied, you did. He swallowed. We didn't know. That, I said gently, was the point. Tonight, as I sit here telling you this story, the envelope rests in a drawer beside my bed. Not as a reminder of wealth, but as proof. That dignity isn't something others grant you. It's something remembering who you are gives back. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly pushed aside, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and remember this: sometimes what looks like the smallest inheritance is the one that changes everything.